Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Springer, and I currently reside in Noblesville, Indiana, with my wife, Sally, and two children, Brody and Lucy. I have an older daughter, Megan, that's 20 years old and currently going to college down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm assistant pastor at White Rock Fellowship here in Noblesville. It's about 3 minutes down the road from my house, so that makes it kind of nice. And I also work for Indiana Wesleyan University in the enrollment area. I look forward to learning with each of you guys throughout this semester, and until we finish out. I had to leave my prior cohort due to some health issues that I needed to take a little bit of a leave from, but back and ready to go and taking 3 courses this semester, so I'll be under a lot of stress. As far as my spiritual formation and growing up in the church, I would say that when I was younger, we went to a Lutheran church. My parents, I grew up going to church every Sunday. And then once my parents got divorced, my mom still took my sister and I to church every Sunday. But when she got remarried, that kind of stopped. I started going back to church again with a friend from school, and he invited me to his church. And so I started going there. But the one thing I remember about that church is there wasn't really a lot of assistance from the church to the youth that were attending, and so there wasn't a lot of help and focus on formation of the youth in the church, and myself personally. Now we did go to church camp. We went to the Rainbow Church Camp in Converse, Indiana, and at that point, that's when I accepted Christ into my life. And then after that, I went off to college, and that I would say was kind of my rebellious time. I didn't go to church while I was in college, did a lot of partying, wasn't the model person, the model Christian that I should have been. And it wasn't until I met my former wife that I got back into church and started going to church regularly. And it was about that time that I started feeling a calling of going into ministry, but, I was a stubborn guy at the time and decided that isn't what I wanted to do. And so I just kept going along with my life. After my wife and I got divorced, I continued feeling that calling, but again, being stubborn, didn't really do anything about it. And thankfully, God put a beautiful woman in my life, my wife, Sally. And from that point, I've been growing with some ups and downs. There was a point in my life where my wife and I contemplated divorce, and it was a really tough time in our relationship. And that's where really the congregation of the church that I'm assistant pastor at now really jumped in. I wasn't assistant pastor at the time. I was just a regular member of the church. But the one thing that I know and I remember is just the outpouring of love and prayers and support, to the fact that I would have different people come over and sit with me just to talk with me and find out where my head was and what I felt I was supposed to be doing and where I was supposed to be going. And it was a different church experience than I'd ever had in my entire life. And it kind of scared me, to be honest. And so I went back to the church that my wife and I had went to prior to this church, and didn't really get a reception there at all. People didn't really even seem to care that I was going through a problem. And while I was away from our church now, I still had people coming and talking with me and trying to get me to come back to church. And so eventually I did. And right before we were supposed to actually have the divorce, something just really turned. It clicked from the church and them working in my wife's life and them working in my life, and us working together, and we were able to maintain our marriage. And we're still going strong, and that was 5+ years ago. So it's great. And then I started getting that calling again, that it was time for me to go into ministry, and this time I actually listened. And I think a lot of it dealt with sitting in church and asking for some sort of a sign. And and having the pastor during his sermon turn and face me right after I'd asked for a sign from God that if this is really what he wanted me to do, to give me some sort of a sign. And the pastor turns and looks at me directly and says, what is it that makes Scott want to do more and go further? And I thought, well, if that isn't a sign, then I don't know what is. And so, I talked with the pastor and his son, the assistant pastor at the time, and I talked with my wife and let her know what I was thinking. And she said, by all means, if God's telling you to do it, then that's what you need to do. And from that point, our church has just really kind of banded around me to help me through this entire process as I'm going through the ministry. And our church is making some different types of changes right now when it comes to spiritual formation and really focusing on that for our congregation. And so we always had small groups, but they weren't really small groups. They were 15, 20 people in a small group, and that's not really that intimate where you can really get down and you can ask those questions. And so that's something that we're kind of working towards right now and getting that done. In fact, here in about an hour and 45 minutes, I'm getting ready to lead one of the small groups here at my house. So trying to get some of my assignments done before everybody comes over and we start that process. But I found that the one thing when it comes to being a Christian and having God work within you is you have to work with other people. You have to be around other Christians because God works through them to work through you. And so that's, really what I have been trying to work with our senior pastor and we're working to try to get that implemented in here. Well, that's me. I look forward to working with all of you. If you have any questions, reach out to me by email, by phone. I'll put my my cell phone number in there as well. I'm always open to talk. But I am looking forward to working with each of you and meeting you sometime soon here in the future. God bless y'all.